Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg, recruiting extraordinaire, also of Hail Varsity, and we are back with another recruiting question of the week. However, it is a Tuesday, not a Monday once again, because Nebraska is in the thick of spring football and we had availability yesterday. So not to fear, we are still here. Greg, how are you?
I am well, except for, I thought I was doing better than I was until when you said it was Tuesday, and I was like, oh yeah, it's Tuesday.
It is Tuesday.
So yeah, we're just gonna roll with that.
Yeah, it's been now for anyone who's like, I need a schedule, I need to know what's going on. Next week is Nebraska's spring break, which means the football team will be off from practice for the week. So there will be no availability on Monday, which means we will have this recording on Monday, like you're used to, and actually the following week too, because the schedule changes just a little bit for a week. So 2 weeks of your more normal recruiting question of the week schedule, not to fear. So let's just dive into the question. Greg has had a number of people ask this on social and just across different channels. So here it is. What is Nebraska looking for in a high school class size for the 2023 class? And what can we expect the same? Oh, and can we expect the same number of transfers as the 2022 cycle? Now we know there are a lot of transfers in 2022. So how is that going to play into it? Is it going to be the same, different? High school class size? Greg, you have a lot to talk about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think first of all, the first part of the question, I think that we're probably looking at 15 or so like traditional high school recruits for the 2023 class, which again is a smaller number than we're probably used to in a typical class. But I think that this time we're going into it knowing that Nebraska is leaving more space and kind of the door open for more transfers if they need to go ahead and do that. I'm really curious because we don't know for sure if the strategy will be to continue to load up on so many transfers, because at some point you want to be able to have that continuity when you're building your team roster in a more traditional way. I think that Scott Frost has said it both ways in previous press conferences that we've had with him. He's both said in the past that you want to get away from leaning on the transfer portal because you need to have that traditional pipeline. But then here recently, he's also said that it might be the new norm to go ahead and try and bring in more transfers. So I think that they're still trying to figure this out on the fly. And my sense is part of this is going to depend on kind of how things go within the season, and especially at various positions, because he had so many position groups this past season that had a lot, or this past recruiting cycle that had so much turnover and so much addition to the rooms via the traditional high school route, JUCO, and the transfer portal. So you just kind of don't know right now how those things are all going to shake out and how many of those players that Nebraska will hit on moving forward.
It's going to be interesting because I think, as we now know, the transfer portal is, like you said, Scott Frost has talked about it. It's a part of the recruiting game now. It cannot be ignored. It's going to have to be something that is factored in. And it'll be interesting because I know he talked quite a bit about, think of it like this way. You have, I was going to say Major League Baseball, but I don't want to hurt anyone right now who's sad that Major League Baseball is currently not playing. Think of any other professional sport. You have people who are dedicated to looking at potential trades, people who are dedicated to looking at, you just have a lot of people who that's their job, is looking at the structure of these teams, whether they're going to be drafting someone or whether they're going to be, trading for someone. It's kind of the same idea. You're still going to have your recruiting staff. You're still going to have all of your people that are dedicated to recruiting those high school, junior college players. But you're also going to have to start having people who are dedicated to just watching the portal and just making sure that you're not missing out on somebody that could be a really big key impact player, especially quickly. I think if you can get yourself to a point, and I think this is what at least I imagine both Scott Frost and any coach wants, is if you can build that really strong base of players from the high school recruiting angle of it, and then only use the transfer portal when you either find someone you just can't pass on because they are too good of a player, you got to go get them, or you have an area that, whether it's due to injury or transfers for your own program, you need somebody quickly, you can go to the portal, bring them in, get them situated while you have then that high school base sort of regrouping to build additional, what's the word I'm looking for? Depth.
Depth. Yeah.
Depth. What a basic word that I couldn't think of. You'd think it was a Monday. But to just build that depth. And so I think, and in my opinion, and this is what so many coaches have talked about, is that the portal can really be a key tool, but it can't be everything. And I know we get a lot of like pushback when I say that on these videos, when I say it's not going to be everything. You're still going to have to focus on high school. I think people are convinced, at least this is my interpretation. I think people are convinced that the transfer portal is absolutely ruining high school recruiting. And I don't know if I quite agree with that. I think high school recruiting still has to be a fundamental piece, because you aren't going to build depth and longevity just from the transfer portal.
It's also hard to build continuity and the very big buzzword around here, culture, in your team doing it through the transfer portal. It's just hard to bring guys in from other programs, especially at such a high clip, right? If you're bringing in double-digit transfers per year, like, you end up getting into the territory of what is your culture and how do you actually like build on that year to year if you're having so many guys in flux in and out of the program. Like, that would just be really difficult to do. One of the things, though, to me that really throws a monkey wrench into all of this when we talk about how will the portal continue to impact things, is that when we first, and it's happened so rapidly, when we first were talking about the portal, we were talking about the Darian Daniels of the world, right? The guys that are graduate transfers that have been at a school 4 or 5 years, that have had a lot of snaps, that can just slide in seamlessly into a program, right? But now that's not necessarily the case of what's happening. You're getting guys that maybe were freshmen at another school, played some, and then are now transferring to a different school, that still have a ton of promise and have 4 years left of eligibility, right? Including a redshirt year. Tommy Hill is the defensive back from Arizona that transferred to Nebraska, is an example of that. Then I'm not saying that that's bad, but that kind of changes the math on how you go about allocating scholarships. Because if you can get such a young player into the roster, that's where I do think that it starts to impact high school recruiting a little bit. But in general, I agree with you, though, that high school recruiting needs to be a fundamental part of what's happening. But it does change things a little bit when you can get such young players to transfer into your program.
Yeah, and and that's going to be something that every coach, we heard so much about it. We've already talked about it in one of these videos, that coaches are going to continue to talk about the portal and what it ultimately means for players. Like, I know we heard a number of coaches say this during Nebraska's pre or first day of spring football press conference, where it was a lot of, the transfer portal allows this option for players if they don't like the way that they were spoken to, or they don't like this, to transfer. And while, yeah, that's possible, it also gives a lot of flexibility that if you are in need of a certain position, there's somebody in that portal that you're probably going to be able to go get. So it's a double-edged sword. It has its perks, it has its negatives, and that's the case with most things. But I still am a core believer of the high school recruiting, that it's not going anywhere. It's not going to change. Like Greg was saying, you need that for continuity. You need it for that culture. You need those players to, you're not building an entire recruiting class around the portal. You are going to be able to hopefully supplement your recruiting class with the portal. It should not, in my opinion, be as many portal transfers like Nebraska had this year. The case just was they were in need of a lot of players in some key spots. So, once you get your team into a spot, it shouldn't be like that. They should be at a place where you can be a little bit more, not saying that Nebraska wasn't. I'm just saying, like, it becomes more of a supplemental piece versus such a large piece. And I think that maybe is why there's so many questions around the portal versus high school recruiting, and maybe so many people who are like, this is ruining high school recruiting, because it feels so stark this year. But I don't think it will always be like that.
No, I totally agree. And it's interesting, though, it's because, we cover Nebraska and it's framed so much about Nebraska, that I do think that the feelings about how the portal is taking over are probably much different here than if we go to, say, like Georgia or Alabama, or pick a team that's in the top 10 consistently of recruiting rankings. Like, they're not bringing in, 10 to 12 transfers in a given year, right? Like, that's used to be able to boost your team quickly. And then I think you want to level it off. Now, those teams are getting the top notch, like best of the best transfers, because they're always going to want to supplement in that way. Like you said earlier, with getting a guy that you just can't pass up on, like, that's always going to happen. But you don't generally find those teams that are recruiting at a high level, that are in, college football playoff contention, bringing in so many transfers on a yearly basis. And that's why I think ultimately you'll see it taper off if the team does take off.
It'll be interesting to watch. I totally understand though. I get it, for especially for so many of you who have personal vested interest in it, because you have
Yes.
kids who are in high school right now and you don't want to see them getting passed by when they're looking at schools right now themselves. So I totally understand. I totally get it. But it'll be interesting to continue to watch, especially through this upcoming season for Nebraska, to see maybe if things level off for just for the high school recruiting versus transfer portal and what it looks like. It obviously is going to depend very much on how Nebraska does this season. So a lot to look for. If you want more on this topic, Greg is going to dive into it further in the recruiting notebook tonight, 6 p.m. Central. But you should just be checking out the recruiting notebook Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central. It's appointment reading. Just go ahead and bookmark it, plan on it. You can always find it at hailvarsity.com. We'd love to have you be a part of that, ask questions, join in the conversation. And you can tweet at Greg @GregSmithHV or at Hail Varsity with additional questions. Like I said, we will be back on Monday next week, like usual. So get excited. Otherwise, Greg, thank you as always for your time. We will actually be back though tomorrow for a football recap once we get past another football availability day. So until then, thank you, Greg. We'll talk to you later.